Those don't want to sit down.
Whenever you're ready.
Okay, ready? We're recording?
Yep.
Okay, I'll go ahead and call this meeting to order. It's a joint city council and planning commission meeting. It is Wednesday, March 13th. Time is 4 p.m. We'll go ahead and go on to our first item, which is vacant storefronts. And just a little recap on that. That just was introduced to us. And we know that we want a thriving Main Street, and we all agreed on that. And I think in that discussion, we had talked about involving Main Street into helping us with assisting on gathering some information. And we have Aaron here Aaron Salisbury from Main Street, the chairperson, and Marcy Sanders. And so I was going to ask them if they'd like to come up and present what they have discovered to us.
You mind if we just kind of pull up some chairs to the table and then?
Absolutely.
It's kind of weird.
Please do. Yes.
I'm snug in between the two of you here.
You might have to be careful.
And I'll note, some folks from Mackenzie will be here at 4:30
Understood.
and they have a
We're
hard
done
stop
now.
at 5:30, so.
Understood. We're not, we will be mindful.
Yes.
Take your time to hurry.
Exactly.
Now, are we gonna use the slides?
Yeah, they're.
But if- don't
We need them.
Okay,
I think,
okay, that's
I
fine,
think
we're good.
this is our, this is a conversation as much to kind of, let's talk about the ideas on the table. And I think I'm the president of the St. Helens Main Street Alliance, 501c3. Our mission is to do whatever we can to support the historic downtown areas of downtown, Riverfront District, all the way up Columbia Boulevard to Uptown. Marcy Sanders is a two-time business owner in the district, but she's also the chair of our Economic Vitality Committee, which is the committee where we do a lot of data collection and we think a lot about grants and how to really support that kind of infrastructure of buildings in downtown. But I think what we kind of wanted to start with all of you is, why do you guys think it's important to fill vacant storefronts? And what we're talking about is commercial spaces that are on the main streets. That's kind of what we're thinking the conversation is about, but why do each of you think that that's an important thing to do?
I'll start and we'll go around the table. I think connectivity. For example, I'm walking down and all of a sudden I start going past 2 or 3 stores that are empty in any city. And where I was having fun and was shopping and looking at things, all of a sudden that stopped and I felt no need to go any further.
Okay, it's good to be. What about you, Joe?
I'm obviously a member of the vice chair of the planning commission, and we had resolved to be proactive. And one of our proactive items was vacant storefront. The reason I kind of moved it up to the forefront is because as we started the proactive items, it seems like whether we like to admit it or not, we all kind of had personal agendas. And I thought it was more important to present a proactive item that I was getting asked about, and by citizens, instead of just what's important to me. Although I do think it's really important. That's kind of what started the ball rolling for me.
Brendan, do you have any?
I think just the image you get when you go into a city, if things are full and there's people coming in and out of businesses, it just gives you an idea that this is a vibrant, active city. Just the opposite, if you're walking down on a weekday and all the shops are closed and there's nothing in the windows, it just kind of gives you the opposite impression.
My thought has always been that there are other communities that do incentives for the city partners and does incentives with property owners to try to get businesses in there. So I know that sometimes when you're first brand new business, the hospital can have this fee and property owners need to make their money, but is there a partnership that can be made to incentivize property owners to rent their place and make it more affordable for small businesses? You know, I've always been a big proponent of micro enterprise and that kind of thing. Started, you know, we've got a lot of home-based businesses. What would it take to get them on a storefront? You know, to grow their business and diversify our economy and just spread the wealth a little bit better. You know, there's always the Main Street piece, and it's more active Main Street is a more vital community. But it's like, what partnership does the city play? And maybe facilitating that, maybe not handling it, but making it not so complicated and giving some incentive to both parties to make that leap.
Speaking of some of that, just, you know, you see an old building or something. You get a business. When they go down and see Jacob and then they get to the building they're in, and it's like, forget it. Because they're gonna bring it up to date, these older buildings, it's amazing what it's good. There's a big stumbling block right there. The incentive part is good. You can't find them, that's just. You have to make, basically, it's, they do it, city uses taxes and that sort of thing. That. Is there again, a big help to us, because we were recipients here, for Main Street, and we're finishing the project. And we're gonna complete it this month for what we've done for, you, but, working with Main Street has been great because it wasn't all the red tape and everything that John wants. Pass that down.
Right.
Very simple, and
Right.
you know, we gave a parameter of what we wanted to do, and you said, well, we can't do that, it's not that, so we narrowed that. We still would have built the project, but you would have seen just some of that neat stuff done, so. I think as far as, first time I ever dealt with it, agency, right? So far, it's been great, so you guys have done great. I mean, also you've interviewed most of the buildings around and stuff, at least have names and that, so.
Yeah.
I think to answer that question, you're gonna find a lot more out once you contact all the business owners, and they're gonna give you pretty much directions of what the issues are.
I understand you're saying about the older buildings. The story, you know, 20 years ago, was kind of a grim place. I used to live there, so, and they've turned that around. I'm not sure how exactly they did that. I wasn't involved, but there seems to be, there is a way.
So,
Yeah, but still, yes. What I, you know, with vacant storefront fronts, I'd like to see a kind of an overall business plan for the downtown, you know, looking at certain types of businesses that feed into the other types of businesses. I mean, they can be, as I was talking in my interview for the planning commission, having businesses that people come down on a regular basis, you know, on a weekly basis, and then other businesses that people come down monthly, and then other ones, you know, where it could be, you know, a lot longer than that. I mean, looking for something that, you know, they can each feed into each other that way. I think also might look at some recruitment for these types of businesses that we're looking for. They can go, you know, not just down here, you know, uptown as you were calling it.
Yeah.
And that, I mean, it's also the streets along there are quite wide. Along there, that could be, I mean, you could have some type of narrowing down on that along there and have kind of a cafe culture along the old. If you increase the sidewalks, you know, just have that kind of a culture along that, so you can walk up and down that. And you can, you know, visit there.
For me, it's somewhat like a two-word answer: economic vitality. Looking at from that standpoint, some of the points made, having an overall plan for the downtown area, I think is crucial. I mean, understanding that what we're dealing with is, it's not necessarily mutually exclusive, but we have property owners and we have business owners. And they're not necessarily the same thing, and that's very true in our, from what I understand.
I'll echo what everybody else said, but I also like, when I think of small towns that have this kind of a atmosphere. That story comes to mind, or some of the sisters in a way, but what brings me back to places like Sisters is always like the unique shops and those qualities like that make me want to go there, even, and I'll spend money and I'll spend more money than I could probably if if I ordered it off Amazon, it'd be cheaper, but this is the
Right.
whole experience.
Right.
Friendly
Right.
staff, and that's the kind of thing so I don't know if that answers your question.
No, I mean, I think this is all informing kind of the picture.
I think everyone's kind of covering what was on my mind, livability and economy. We want people to spend their money here because it's a great place to live, people to come here and visit, and
Yeah.
not just for Halloween Town, but throughout the year.
Yeah.
And like we're having Sister, Pineville is another one we go to.
Sandy.
over and over
Sandy.
again. And we have the girlfriend office, and all the things to do, and it just makes it really different for life.
What about you, John?
So echoing a lot of what's already been said, but active vibrant communities have doors that are open during the day and some into the evenings, they're inviting, livability has people watching, there's outdoor dining, and the title here is vacant storefronts, but really it's underutilized as well. And
Right.
so the businesses are only open seasonal or open on weekends or
Right.
that those
Right.
all kind of play into that livability.
Right. In Main Street, which again, we're not just local, we're part of a statewide movement, a national movement. We're working off a methodology, but there's a lot of talk about the reason why having a vibrant downtown district is that it's like the heart of a community. And I think it was at our board retreat, somebody expanded on that and said, the heart circulates the lifeblood of the community and of the body of the community, and in the same way we circulate financial health throughout the community, social health, the feeling of belonging and that it's a place where you want to be and you want to bring your family down. Downtown districts, historic districts, and I really want to, echo this, that the Holton district, I've heard so many folks that grew up here talk about how lively it was in their youth. And there's no reason it also can't have that kind of same vibrancy that I think we're imagining. So the way we approach this is, we have taken a dive into what have some other Main Street districts across the country done. And I'm gonna have Marcy talk to you a little bit about some of the things she's found in doing her research. But we really look at this as the beginning of a conversation. The city council and planning commission can work on things about ordinances and rules, and you can even create incentive programs. But what we've learned from what works is that you can't do it by yourselves. And that's part of what we're here to kind of bring to the table is, yes, indeed, property owners and business owners are different animals. And some of it is matchmaking and meeting needs. And like I think we've all joked before, it's really hard sometimes to say, I'm from the government, I'm here to help. We can approach the problem sometimes from a little bit different position in terms of relationship building, in terms of offering support and alternative paths, right, to solving some of these problems. But some of what we have to do first is we have to pay attention to it. We have to start somewhere. So do you want to talk, Marcy, about what we kind of our first pass on?
So the Economic Vitality Committee is one of basically 3 or 4 committees of our St. Helens Main Street Alliance. And it is part of the state and national structure. So any main street that you look at has at its core an economic vitality focus among three other things. And yeah, we could go into all of that, but we did that last week. For economic vitality, the front and center is the vitality of the buildings and the businesses in the district. And so as part of that, in fact, with really getting going with this committee, our focus this year is on developing a comprehensive inventory of the buildings and the businesses along the corridor. We've already done a pretty, significant first part of that with all the businesses. And our next focus is on the buildings and the property owners.
Yeah.
So we took a first pass at this database that we're developing with the buildings and just focused on the vacant, empty, non-active buildings and storefronts. Really, it's storefronts. Although in some cases, a building in itself is a storefront. So out of about 153 total storefronts along the route, that we identified 18 that are in some stage of emptiness. They've either kind of been dormant for a while, or they might just be turning over. There's, there could be rent signs, for sale signs. And in my mind, those are also, prime opportunities because those property owners are paying attention right now. They need something. They're economically incentivized. And as Erin, pointed out, and as, Russ has experienced in working with Main Street on an incentive program. And Russ is not alone. He's there with Holcomb and Dave with Crooked Creek. This is, that is one avenue. But it is an avenue that we as Main Street are directly involved with helping make happen and helping you move it along. So one of the things also that I was able to, dig up with the fact that there is quite an arsenal of data available through other Main Streets, not just in Oregon, but around the country. Georgia did had an economic analysis, economic impact done on their Main Street programs back in 2012. And what they came up with was a cost of an empty storefront. A cost of an empty storefront that is not active for a year. And that cost was right around $400,000. So what that cost means, the breakdown of that is the cost of lost revenue. So it's every dime that could have gone into the local economy from not having any activity in that space.
So it's not about taxed assessed value of the
It's-
property. It really is about the impact on the local economy to not having something active there, whether that's a restaurant or a shop or a store
Yeah.
or.
I'm talking about missed potential.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
lost sales, lost tax revenue, lost rents, lost owner compensation or profit, lost employee payroll, and lost building and business loan demands to local banks. If you apply that to 18, that's our number. Now, these haven't all been empty for a year. We don't, but some of them
have been empty for
many years. And you just multiply it straight out, it's over $7 million.
7.2.
Yeah.
Just did it.
And that's 2012.
Yeah, those are 2012 numbers. So I think part of what we want to frame in visiting with you today is that Main Street would love to partner with you. And there are some creative ways that we could be working together. Whether or not the city needs to change codes. Unclear. Whether or not the city wants to decide enforcing the codes it already has in terms of underutilized commercial buildings or what street presentation looks like or any of those things. That's certainly a tool that could be used. But what I guess the Main Street perspective would be, there's always room for relationship building, starting a conversation with property owners, individualizing those conversations about what is it gonna take for you to lease or rent this building? What are the code issues? What are the building issues? And perhaps there's room for Main Street to be a partner in those conversations in a way that's a little more difficult than, say, sending your building codes folks to go start a conversation. Nobody wants bad relationships within a district. We all want to partner and collaborate together. I mean, our perspective is more work gets done easier when we are working together towards a shared goal. We've all got different perspectives and tools we can bring to it. You know, we are going to keep doing this work regardless. We would love to assist in any way that we can. If there indeed is a task force that gets put together, we're happy to help with that in any way, but we see this regardless as being a part of what we are doing work on in the community right now. And we would welcome if there are property owners who are listening to this meeting and would like to find ways to activate their property. We are happy to research grants, explain the grants we already know about, and try to assist with funding. That's what we're here to do. What am I missing?
I mean, we have, there are lots of great examples of what some communities have done, Main Street communities have done to a little life into and create interest around some of these vacant spaces. But you know, that we can bring all of that to the table as well.
You know, and there's pieces too of, you know, education that can happen. Sometimes it's simply, sometimes property owners don't realize that in Oregon, commercial lending is not the same as, say, when you're going to rent a house to someone. You can ask a lot of other questions about what kind of business, and you can make choices about what kind of business does go in to your property. You can ask for things like business plans. You can ask for things like, you know, financial statements. You can ask for partnerships from somebody like Main Street or the Small Business Development Center to help vet who your potential tenant is going to be. You don't have to take the first person that comes to you. You can decide, actually, I do want to rent to somebody who's going to be open on the weekends. But this is a conversation as a community beyond this shared body that we can start having with our citizens about what do we want our district to look like? Do we want it to be open on the weekends? Do we want there to be restaurants? Do we want there to be more retail opportunities? And that's something that we can all work on together as business owners, as property owners, as electeds, as volunteers. Pretty much everybody in this room is.
I'm just curious, do you have folks that come to you like that have a plan that are looking for somewhere? Or
Heck, yes.
so,
There is a
That's something-
hunger for locations.
and so that's something you can facilitate or help with.
We can facilitate. I have a day job where I am supporting small business and I work very closely with Jason Moon of the SBDC. We are also, Main Street is also partnering with Columbia Economic Team a little bit later this year to do a very large, will help with the St. Helens part, but a business survey about what are the challenges to current business owners and even potential business owners. There's going to be questions about properties and facilities and locations and costs and all those kinds of things, that should be a rich source of data for us, in Main Street and just kind of in the economy, in the community in general. But we will continue to be engaged in this. We see this as a,
So this
Strong part
is
of our
more
mission.
about getting the property owners to connect with potential business owners than.
well, it depends. It possibly, I mean, every single business owner is different, so is every single property owner. You know, we'd like to get to know the property owners better and see what they're looking for.
I think the big key really is. It's nice to, if we can do it just by incentivizing things, but in the research that I've done, there's a lot of cities, big and small, that have vacant building registries. There's a cost. And it runs from, if your building's vacant for more than 30 days to 180 days, then you have to pay a fee.
Yeah.
And
Estorate has that.
And so I ran into that quite a bit, but if you're looking at, for instance, let's do real things, the bank building, by the time you purchase the bank building, you're almost $1 million by the time you open the doors, retrofitting what it needs for fire code and all those different things, and we need to figure out how we can attract not just people with deep pockets, but people that, you know, can want to open a small business.
Like you said, there's several other communities, I don't know the details of what Portland did for their empty downtown core. And they did it a couple years in a row, and they said, we'd love to repeat it, but we filled all our spots. Obviously, COVID changed all that, but they only had to do the project for a couple of years, and they didn't have any more vacant spots. So there are programs out there that incentivize.
Beaverton Main Street had an incentive program more recently where they actually had two separate programs. One was for, and the amount that you received was based on whether you were starting one of their targeted desired types of businesses, which I think was restaurants and retail stores versus, say, a professional services office. And so you could get more money if you were one of the types of businesses coming in.
One thing we really haven't spoken about is the big thing for St. Helens is Halloween Town. So cultural events. And if we get a number of those going on, people are actually, that's their livelihood comes through that particular month for the rest of the year. And we have 13 nights, could find, you know, develop other cultural events that would feed into it. And the businesses or the buildings, we'd see the opportunity that incentivize them to think, hey, this is a moneymaker. Let's, you know, let's do something about that.
It's getting close to
Yeah,
4:30.
yeah, and we're just scratching the surface on this. It feels so, yeah. I really apologize for that. I mean, that's. I don't know how we
I think this
continue
is
this
the beginning of
conversation.
the conversation.
I know, but it would be nice to continue this conversation sooner than 3 months out.
Yes, it would.
I don't know how we go about facilitating that type of meeting.
I mean, if you want to continue talking about this after 5:30, we want to be respectful of our consultants' time.
Definitely, yes. Jacob, you have other stuff that you want to check out though? I think code amendments.
Yeah, that's probably 15 minutes.
Okay, and then architectural standards is another one that we was proactive item too. So,
We're not really prepared to do a deep dive in there. I think that falls into this conversation too.
a little bit, yeah, it does. So, yeah, if you have the opportunity to stick around, great, and if you don't, I mean, yeah.
No, I come back.
Well, plus I want to say that I know that we had talked about even, you know, the planning commission having a committee that involves people outside the planning commission even to, you know, at least look at things and do some of this partnership. And
When it looks like, again, doing research, other cities have done it in town hall formats, they've done it in advisory committee formats, and so it's a staffing thing. We would need to talk about how we would do that.
I think jointly, we appreciate you being here because we knew this would be a hot topic item, and I think it is we're both quasi judicial.
Right.
We are that, we're government, we're here to help, right? You aren't. But I want to also just express the importance of Main Street too, before you guys, hopefully you stick around, but, you talked about the grants and stuff.
Yeah.
That actually cannot happen without a Main Street, which if you do not have that in place, no city qualifies for any state funding through Main Street grants. And they're always available every couple of years.
And, and we're figuring out how to do more than that.
Yeah,
Planning
absolutely.
Commission, you reviewed the elevator tower on the Klondike yesterday. That's from a Travel Oregon grant that we wrote for the Klondike.
$100,000 grant.
$100,000 grant. So, we really, what we want you to understand is that we are absolutely committed to transforming the properties in this corridor. I mean, Russ, your property that you've built across from Red Apple, that has been a vacant lot since the inception of this city. So it is now going to be creating assessed value and as well as a kind of vibrant economy. Those are the kinds of projects we'd like to assist with. And so, yes, we can have conversations with private property owners in ways that be a little harder for
You
you.
were tour that 388 apartments.
Yeah.
Plus 4 above and a commercial space. It's a nice building, yeah.
Thank you for your time. We actually have another meeting, but we may try to come back and at 5:30.
Yeah, I apologize that, yeah.
No worries.
Yeah.
That's the beginning. You guys decide how you want to use us.
Yeah, well,
Okay.
definitely be in touch. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, and the reason we had to cut that short is because we have our next item, which is police station location. And I'm gonna turn it over to Jim Greichen, because I know we have the folks from McKinsey who help do the rendering of our police station. And if you want to come up, you can have these couple seats right here.
Thanks. So they have some slides help navigate the group in the discussion of potential other sites. And with that, I'll move on to that. Okay, that's fine. Didn't you have something that you needed to cover too, or you wanted to go ahead and get started? Go ahead. Okay. You have the limited time.
Well, I don't know, Thomas and
Yes.
Iris, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, so you may or may not remember me. I'm Thomas Peck, I'm an architect and design director with McKinsey, been engaged on this project. This is Iris. She's been working with us the whole time, for the most part, the last year on the project, so representing McKinsey today. We basically, we've been looking at 4 sites that we wanted to bring to discussion today to kind of evaluate if we should continue to look at them as potential location for the new police station. You wanna?
Just a little more context on,
Yeah.
why we're here and, the city did a selection process back, it's getting to be your 2 years, 3 years now. It's getting to be a ways ago, and there was 10 sites initially selected. They went through a screening process and kind of narrowed down, ranked and prioritized. Came to the council, council picked the top 2, decided to work just on the Castor Road project. We all know that the Castor Road project is under appeal. And the council, this time around wanted planning commission's input on that, when they directed us to go out and staff to go out and look at different sites. And, the last meeting, the council wanted the planning commission to be involved with this, so that's why we're here talking about these projects, potential projects, and from that selection committee, some of those sites are no longer viable. They're either in other uses and things, so we've kind of picked 4, some are new, and we have 4 plus the short discussion about Castor Road to talk about. And our objective here is to make this list smaller, and focus on 1 or 2, maybe there's a new one that comes up. And so that's how we're at.
So this is in place of if Castor doesn't go through.
Yeah, this discussion is about sites other than Castor. If you want to talk about Castor, I think we can, but probably after the consultants have had their time. So we can.
Yeah, make most work there. Yeah. I just want to, John didn't clarify though, it was an ad hoc committee of about 10 people, I wanna say. It involved a couple planning commissioners. George Dunkel, Diane Dillard, some business owners,
I think it was more than 10.
Yeah, it was a big group.
yeah,
Big group, yeah.
that actually narrowed all this down
Quite a few
as a
meetings.
recommendation
In
to
the meantime.
to four sites, and then the officers themselves also picked the Castor Road set. Because one of these that I think we're gonna see today was the number one from the ad hoc committee. Oh, it is actually, so it's up there already. Never mind. Yep.
Thank you for some context about how we got here. So-
No, thank you. I didn't want to breeze through any context. So I think, what may or may not be known is that through the previous site review process, there was criteria that was applied. So there was a lens of criteria that all the sites were evaluated through, and that's how things, got narrowed down. I think we're prepared for direction to do that process again, but what we wanted to do is just present these 4 sites that have been drawn attention to now. See if there's any that stand out, see if there's any that we should just eliminate altogether because they don't appear to be viable. And to John's point, if there's something not on these 4 lists, that's another site that hasn't been considered, to open that up for consideration. So the first site, is, I think it was the number one. It was from the previous site assessment study when we evaluated properties, and that's the Columbia Boulevard, 1771 site. So Jacob, if you. Oh, you're controlling. Could you just go to the next slide? We'll just jump right into it. So what we've done is there's some metrics on the left-hand side that kind of identify things about this site. The main consideration for the site, when it came down to it, I think, was that there's the utility that's bisecting the site parallel to 17th Street, 18th Street, or 16th Street.
That's the old PGE building, just to clarify.
Yeah, whole block.
And so what we are showing on the right-hand side is the current design of the new police station is dropped on this site, showing that it would fit on this site and the parking requirements for the program appear to be met on the site. We haven't done any deeper analysis on green space requirements or any of those other things, but it does appear there's gonna be a cost of relocating the utilities that bisect the site. So there's that was a consideration before, it's still there now. And then we have a list of pros and cons for each site that we've identified. At a high level, the pros for this is there's direct access to the community. It's a visible site for bicycle routes.
Zoom in a little.
Yeah, could you, for everyone else's benefit, not just mine and the Coke bottles on my face.
Is that enough or should I
Yeah,
go
that's
more? Okay.
That's probably fine. It's close to City Hall, so, you know, it's closer to the downtown. I think the significant con for this one, just to promote visibility to the most important con, is it's not city owned. It would need to be purchased. And then whether it's desired or not, because of the frontage requirements of this property, it's a 0 lot development, so the police station would need to be right at the public right of way. But that's not necessarily a bad thing. I think it kind of aligns with some of the goals that we heard early on in the design process about having a welcoming public presence. The program for the police station has changed since then. Obviously, there's not the community space in the court as part of the program, but as a new public safety building, its presence would still be very visible. So that could be considered a pro or a con, depending on your perspective on the site. We could just run through the list here. So the other cons are, the sanitary sewer, obviously, the frontage piece, and then a part of the site would have to be rezoned, which might just be kind of an administrative thing, but in order to be able to have this use here, that zoning change would have to happen. What I think we should do is we should just go through all 4 sites and then we can have discussion about questions. That way, maybe looking at the other sites will answer some of your questions. So the next one is the current location for police. what we're showing here on the right-hand side is, you know, the current design of the police station, just rotated one in green or blue in those dashed lines. On the right-hand side image. It's possible that it could slide closer to 12th, but we haven't evaluated if there needs to be a redesign of the footprint and the adjacencies of the program of police. We're just trying to get a sense of whether or not the program fits. It looks like all the parking fits, but depending on where the building would need to go, the parking is kind of bisected into 2, 3 different lots, so it's not exactly that efficient. Pros, it's already owned by the city. We believe it can park and fit the program in some way or another. It's really close to the fire station, so that's potentially a really positive consideration. And the on-street parking could help count towards the parking permits for this and just more public parking if there was a need. The cons, it's probably gonna have to be phased. The lot definition coordination with fire station, there's an issue there. As I just mentioned, we might have to redesign the building to some degree to make sure it fits. I think the biggest con of the site is that it's more than likely gonna require the relocation of police operations if we were to build on the site, because they're there now. And there's a cost associated with that, there's chain of custody with evidence, and there's complications associated with their temporary relocation for the duration of construction, so that's probably one of the biggest cons for this site.
You guys know what you're talking about because you've done a lot of police stations, McKinsey and.
I think, yeah, there's just legal requirements for things like that. If they have physical evidence, there's a component there. If they gotta find another home somewhere here in the community, where is that gonna be? There's probably rent associated. So there's costs associated with that. So we worked on projects where that was enough of a consideration that we figured out a way to design or locate a new place for the police station, public safety building, so they can maintain operation until they would transition into the new facility. The next site is at the sheriff's office. So this whole concept would show police co-locating on the same site with the sheriff's office. The pros is it appears that the building is on the right-hand side, as you can see the footprint of the building there on Port Avenue. That the building and parking could probably be accommodated on this site. Potentially minimal site work. We think that the existing design without redesigning the police station, it's possible that it could be placed here on this site. The cons are the floodplain issue. This location is placing it over the 500-year floodplain line. So technically it's outside of the 100-year. Technically, we could build up the site potentially to address that issue like we did on the Castor site, but there's a political community, there's sentiments associated with that, so we just want to promote visibility. That's probably the biggest con on the site, is that could be an issue. And if any site work needs to be addressed, it could impact public access and parking for the sheriff's office if any attempt to mitigate or address that was a part of placing it here. But size-wise, footprint-wise, it fits, so there's viability in that regard. And then the last site is the community center off of Gable Road. It appears that we could, so that it was a totally different design for a police station. It would be utilizing this existing structure. It would require an addition of some sort to accommodate all of the police program that's currently designed for now. It looks like the parking could mostly fit, but there's some considerations for buffering adjacent to the residential properties. So the pro is that it could support expansion. There's 2 points of access off of Alexandra and Gable. It's city owned. and there's a public presence on Gable. The con is you lose the community center. That may or may not be something that would be a concern for the general public here. We think that maybe there is. You're gonna put a lot of money into retrofitting to seismically upgrade the existing building to meet code for public safety building. So there's a cost associated with that. It isn't a new building, it's retrofitting an existing building. And it would require somewhat of a redesign of the police station. The current design would not be able to work here. If this structure is gonna be utilized. That's probably the biggest con, I think. Is the design time and fees associated with that impacting schedule. And then a zoning change as well. I think Jacob, keep me honest on this, but it's not an allowed use, so there would be a zoning change for this property as well. That's correct. That's kind of the very quick down and dirty sort of comparatives. There's a lot of talking points for each one. Some of them, there's some overlap. I think what we were hoping is there a particular site that stands out that's like, let's continue to look at it, or other top 2 or 3? We're hoping to eliminate potentially some of these sites, but that's sort of what we're asking for your feedback is there a direction the council would like to give on any further exploration? And that would tie into the next slide, is that there's scoring criteria that we've kind of customized to be relevant to these 4 sites. And then if you were to go to the next slide, what the exercise would be, if we were just as a hypothetical, if we were at 4 sites, or if we were looking at 2 or 3 or whatever, we would rank the sites, 4 being the highest rank, 1 being the least rank in each category. And that's gonna give us a total ranking score for every site. And that could be sort of a numerical, objective way of this body evaluating the sort of viability of the sites. And that could be part of what determines which is the best fit going forward. If one of these 4 is even the right answer, if we were looking at another site. John, is there anything else beyond that you want to add?
That was a pretty good flyover there. Yeah.
I have a question on the on the Gable Road site, where the community center is. Is it worth remodeling that building if we're gonna put it there, or could we just demolish that and put the existing plans on that site?
That's an excellent question. I don't know if we're the right group to answer that. I think typically, if you have an older building and you have to put money into retrofitting it to meet code, you want it to be an essential facility. It's harder to do that with an existing building than it is to plan for it in a new building.
It's already planned for in the new design.
Yeah, and that's it's not a blanket statement. Sometimes upgrading a building is simpler than others. Other times it's not, it's almost not worth it. You might as well tear it down, because the cost of that could be comparable. And then the outcome isn't gonna be as optimal. Money has been put into this building to update it, to sort of bring it up to snuff a little bit. I think there's been some interior work. I'm not exactly sure, John, what the full extent of it. But there's been money already spent into this that could get scraped off altogether to make it work for a police station, depending on how the program would lay out in it. So that could be considered a loss.
The city paid for a building, and that would be totally wasted.
But the other part that I don't think is our job to answer is whether or not the sort of intrinsic or actual value of this building as a community center that seen as an asset to the community, if it's worth taking that use away and making it a public safety building. I think that's something that you probably have a stronger idea or sense about.
I'm not sure how we make this comparison without some discussion about cost.
Right, no,
Like,
I think
kind of plucked from air.
Yeah.
It's, we don't know the cost comparison of the different sites.
I didn't see anything about growth or conditions, if the sites could accommodate, if there is, future growth.
Iris, you can help me out a little bit on this maybe, but I think that we looked at square footage wise, there could be a little bit of room for growth.
In this site.
I don't know how much growth that was.
Using the existing building.
Yeah.
We're using existing, and that's 11,000 square feet, and that is including having future police lockers included in there, so.
How many square feet is existing, the proposed?
11,000.
11,000,
Yeah.
and this one's how big?
The one that we're showing is 11,000 as well, so.
Okay, so it's kind of a match.
Yeah,
But the Gable Road, it would require a complete redesign. We would have to assess and understand that structure and.
Yeah. That's not an expense just right there, rather.
I mean, there would be an expense because we would need to understand what we're working with. We would need to look at adjacencies of the program for police and try to figure out how to fit the program within that existing building. And what the addition would look like to accommodate that program. So there's this site, unlike the other 3, 2.5, depending on whether or not the existing police location would require any sort of adjustment to the current design. This one, it would be an entirely different building altogether. The other 3 sites, one of them, we would need to look closer, but the other 3 sites have the potential for the existing design of the new police station to be dropped on the site. And so we have an understanding of the cost of the building itself with that. There was site work that was part of the consideration of the cost of construction on the Castor site. Some of that cost might be less on some of these other sites because we're not building up the grade to mitigate the floodplain issue. But things are only getting more expensive every second with construction. So without having that reevaluated, I don't know the cost comparison of what you've seen before for the Castor site.
I think the Gable Road site, the biggest problem I have for that is it's not centrally located, and it's really in. Yeah, it's out and it's in neighborhood,
And I don't love the idea of getting rid of the community center.
yeah, and that's another issue.
That
So
would be my last choice too. That's it.
the only reason I asked is because it's if we're considering that, so I just don't think this is a good site.
If we had one of our structural leads here with us, because we do a lot of seismic retrofitting on public safety buildings, fire especially, so we have a sense, Mackenzie has a sense of cost and what's involved in that, and it's not inexpensive. But I'm not qualified to give you a dollar amount based on square footage and without even setting foot in that building, but it's not cheap. You spend a lot of money, you don't even realize what you're spending on because you don't always see what you've spent on to do it, and that could be unfortunate.
Well, for what it's worth, my preference would be to use the existing design and put it on. That's more centrally located lot for that, whatever we decide that it's gonna be. I don't know if the sheriff's office is a great place to put it. I think that's gonna cause all sorts of problems. I think looking at the existing police site is a good idea if we could get. I think the biggest concern I would have is the chain of command of the evidence. Where are we gonna put that where it's secure, right? I mean, I don't know if the current sheriff's office or the jail could spare some space, but. I mean, I went in there on a ride along with Officer Coy and. It's in some pretty rough shape. But that seems the most reasonable to me. I know that there'd have to be demolition to it and so there'd be a little extra cost there, but that's where I would be.
So the existing site, if I'm looking at that correctly, then talking about revitalization of Main Street, it means we have a parking lot out onto Columbia Boulevard. You'd be demolishing is that Midway Electric?
Yeah, and I don't know how that's a private set of property.
Yeah.
We didn't talk about that, that is.
Privately.
Yeah,
It's also preservationist in me. One of the only examples of an Art Deco building left in the community, even though it's been called blight recently, I strongly disagree with that, and what it could be.
I strongly disagree with it.
I hadn't heard it being called blight.
Yes,
Sorry.
it was, has been called blight, in
It's
our
a
meeting,
neat, it's a neat old building.
and it. I don't like the idea of a parking lot right on Main Street.
Doesn't the little chunk belong to the little square that's the fire department? Is that the fire department or is that ours? I think it's the fire
The
department.
spot where they park now belongs to the fire department, so. Looking at this kind of gives the impression that we own all this and we don't.
Well, that changes things up.
Just so that currently the city owns the back L
We
portion.
own the L.
Unless, because the fire and police are not taxed. It's possible there's some data entry error from decades ago that was not resolved because there's not incentive to resolve it because they're not taxed. There hasn't been the title research for that. But because it's so jacked as far as police and fire ownership, I wonder if that's the problem.
I actually really like the location of the sheriff, adjacent to the sheriff. It seems like a centralized location. More of that command center kind of thing that we originally had all considered, and whether that could end up being sharing staff or other ways to save money by having it all consolidated in one location seems very intriguing to me.
One issue on that would be because of the flood potential in Mill
Yeah,
Creek.
it's the same.
Everything's on one side, whereas if they went with the words as currently been proposed, you'd be divided by the creek, so you can get services on either side of it.
Yeah, if I didn't mention it, that was probably. Flood, related to the floodplain issue is that it could limit access hypothetically.
Okay.
So.
We're not really competing with the 500 year floodplain deer lakes, which is the 100.
100, right? Yeah.
That's the kind of benchmark, right? Want to stay out of that.
That map does show the 100-year, see how far away it is there.
Yeah, the
The
code,
Castor Road did the 100-year floodplain cross that.
I'm
Right up to the corner of the building.
not 2
marginal.
to 3 feet away from it.
Yeah, technically, the site design of the building was outside of the 100-year floodplain. So
But the access was not.
Access.
the main access was not, the secondary access was outside.
Well, it is technically outside the 100-year floodplain because it's in between the 100-year and 500, just further down the road.
I think,
You had flood in the corner, during, where the intersection is, but where the actual
Yeah.
Entryway is within 500.
So is this not showing the parking? It only shows the footprint of the building.
The public side would be the parking lot, the already existing parking lot.
trying to utilize.
So it involves shared parking with. okay,
Right,
got
there's the
it.
public side and then there's the secure side.
I don't necessarily have a problem with this site if the building is independent of the sheriff's office. I know we could share resources with, since they already have the existing lobby. There's a lot of things that could be shared, but I'm not sure if that's something, I mean, that's up to the agencies really to make that determination. Yeah, I mean, I don't want. It seems to be a little.
Hand grenade like
Yeah,
that.
and I don't wanna cause problems for either one of those.
Especially it's not big enough.
The way this was proposed to me is that with that idea that they could share staff and they could have an open
Yeah.
reception area, but our current police force said the only thing we would like to share is parking. So they said the idea is that we're gonna be sharing staff and
That's the impression. I
that's
got.
that would not be desirable for them.
However, everything else about the site, I mean, really, I like that. Like it's got the, the existing secure parking, it's got, I mean, it might have to be expanded a little bit, especially the, well, maybe not the, I got the clock for that, so. It's got all those routes to, it is centrally located, and it's got all those routes to downtown. Across the tracks, it's got, and it's comparable to Castor Road site. Really, as far as access. I think just keeping those two entities separate would be very smart.
I think every community is different. But it's more often than not, they operate very differently.
Yeah.
The sheriffs are elected. It's different. They do things procedurally different. There has to be cooperation they have to cooperate. That's a real thing, but they do operate differently. There's not always the camaraderie, but every community is different. So if that's something that would work here for this community,
Oh, I know they don't play nice, so I don't.
sometimes police and fire don't play nice, and other times they're good friends, but every community is different, and because of the public safety work that we do, we see a gamut, we see a range of and we try not to bring any preconceived notions, but if we hear that they don't get along, well, it doesn't surprise us. But we don't want to assume that.
It's a point in time, right? So this is a building that's gonna be here for 50 years and these are people, but facilities are. They're separate, independent.
I guess I kind of misspoke that when I said I didn't agree with this one. Because I think it's got all the egresses to get pretty much anywhere in town quickly. It's like the Castor Road property.
It almost is a little bit better, I think.
In a way, I think you're right, yeah.
For utilities, it's better.
For utilities, it's 100%.
I don't think site prep is gonna be nearly an issue like it would have been some of the other ones because it's just grass right now. There's no utilities to move, there's no, well, as far as I'm. Speaking a lot of terms, but it just seems like it would be a good fit there.
Isn't there quite a bit of savings by already using their parking?
Yeah, I would think so.
But we can't make decisions here.
No, we're looking for direction. Yeah. And things like land cost. County seems to be a big one.
Are there frontage improvements in this one?
It's complete, so that would be another thing.
Yeah,
that's-
Other savings.
You say access, so that if you can't get out on Portland Road, you go to industrial way all the way down and follow the tracks in the corner. It's the only other way out.
In port,
That's what the county's doing now. So it's no different than what the county's doing.
Right, but you're saying.
but you got two ways out, right? I mean, you can take Old Portland down to Columbia or take Old Portland.
Out because they said that, yeah, flood issue.
I just don't see it ever being an issue. No hydrologists. Yeah. Do you think that's an issue with the flood thing?
Well, I mean, obviously, the argument still stands on this one compared to the other one. Where it was gonna currently go, I think. If you're looking at the 500-year floodplain.
I certainly wouldn't want to get into an issue with somebody filing an appeal.
Why don't we ask our floodplain administrator if there's a difference?
Who might that be?
Jacob?
Yeah, I mean, this one doesn't flirt with the 100 like the other side did. And looking at the data showing that depth, that was like, wow, this is crazy that it's showing this. You don't have some of those numbers here that you do at the Castor site. So obviously you had to talk about the 500. But some of the characteristics that were like, okay, we need to think about this on the Castor site are not the same here. Yeah, I mean, just from the design standpoint on Castor, for direction, we made accommodations for the 100-year and even, I believe, the 500-year flood elevation. So when we set the finished floor elevation of the police station on Castor, it was free and clear of both. But it's still an issue.
Yeah.
It created an appeal.
Yeah.
But so technically, from a design standpoint, we believe we had mitigated that issue with the design, that the police station would never be underwater. And secondary access was provided on, through the neighborhood on 15th or whatever, that this was still an issue, so. if there's any sentiment that this would still be the same issue. We don't know that, but we tried to explain as much as we could about how we were mitigating the floodplain issue on the Castor site. And it was still appealed, so.
I thought it was well documented. I thought you guys did a great presentation.
Do we know, John, what ownership would look like at this site?
Well, the commissioners haven't made a decision, but talking with Commissioner Garrett, he's very receptive. Sense that the others would be too, as far as a lease or ownership, or we have joint facilities with the fire district, and we have, you know, relationships to other relationships that seem to work pretty well with partners. But it wouldn't. Land cost is anticipated. Huge factor.
Can you give a ballpark of what the, how long it would take to be shovel ready? For that reason?
It's by far the most shovel ready of the ones we're looking at.
Yeah.
Qualitatively, I don't know.
Sure.
Can we bring up the Columbia Boulevard one?
Columbia Boulevard.
Yeah, sorry.
I was on the selection committee when we were doing this, and this was my choice versus the other one.
I think it was all your guys' number one,
This was
right?
my number one.
Yeah, I think it was.
It's a number one choice, and the presence of the community was very important. The response time, everything was very positive, so I think the biggest thing is they said the utilities are running through the site. And they can't have that, but that's what other utilities? Sewer, water.
The sewer
line. It's the sewer
line.
line.
Sewer, yeah.
It's a sewer line that's midway north and south. If you could zoom in, it just shows that hatched area on the right-hand side. So you can see it, that hatched zone is the sewer line that bisects the.
That's the 15 foot easement.
I don't know if there's an easement on there. Our normal easement width is 15 feet.
Right.
Some of the old sites, you know, they're pre-easement.
Yeah, we put more parking over that part. Make it happen that way without having to change the route. The other problem, not problem, the other issue was it's privately owned. We're talking with the owner of the property, he's willing to work with the city. But you'll want, obviously, to be compensated in some way.
I know this vote was taken right before I left office, and this was high on the list for council at that time. Because of the inclusiveness of the location.
Is there any data on what it does for revitalizing this in Holton, right? So.
Yeah, so that's
For the
what,
community.
that was part of our discussion with council at the time, was with Jenny was, recalls, is that this was actually, because of it wasn't as affordable as Castle Road, this was a really nice place to have a $12 million building, to show off. And, there's nothing new up in that whole district. Can you imagine a $12 million police station up there with,
One shot to the middle of town,
yeah.
Well, we can help there.
the whole drive.
The whole drive all the
Yeah,
time.
yeah.
When people come into town, they'll see the presence of the police station, and it's close to schools, people can walk there.
It's just the building there and the sewer line and stuff. It was like,
Is that the old CCB?
Old
No.
PGE building.
Yeah, initially,
It's Shields, installation now.
Okay.
Yeah, kitty corner from where Semling's Pharmacy was.
there's actually two businesses in there. There's Shields installation and a food cart manufacturer.
Can the building not be redesigned to make it longer?
It's way outdated. It would be like seismic. That would be a nightmare.
And that's not.
If you bump it, they'll fall into it.
Your demolition costs of the building, if there is any remediation, assuming there is, probably. You're better off to do that than to try to.
Do seismic, yeah.
Because the building of that age. who knows?
the site has had a fair amount of environmental
Work on it.
work done on it, assessment work done on it. One other thing I wanted to point out was when we initially were doing the selection committee, this was a lot bigger building. It was a 22,000 square foot building and it was in a 2-story configuration, which was kind of
I've
judged.
never worked there.
Well, it would have had to been 2-story, and so, we're not looking at it as big of a building anymore, so. It's
Yeah.
a little bit different in
Good
that
point.
regard.
Yeah, it was, that was the $22 million version.
You could
Council
narrow,
chambers.
you could narrow that building and still have the easement for the sewer on the side. Make it more rectangle.
One of the pros is to not redesign the building for this site, though.
So would it just have, would you just have to move the sewer over into the parking lot? Excuse me?
That's appropriate. You have to keep that design. Can't change it.
There's been a lot of work done on it. I know it'd be, I'm not, I've been part of the team. I'll let you answer. Cause I don't.
It could be redesigned, but I think the assessed cost of relocating the sewer would wanna be weighed against, the cost of delay of Yeah, I don't think there's anything that would, I mean, we talked on the other sites, we indicated that we would have, it would be a different design. If the cost was low to relocate the sewer, you could take the current design and set it on the site. So that's an option.
You have to compare.
And we have somewhat worked on that issue with their engineering team to see what that involves, and is it order of magnitude, is it 100,000, is it 500,000? I know I put.
Rock is there.
And you move to 17th, you move to 18th, put it in the right of way.
Out of the sewer.
Sewer, yeah.
So you couldn't just move it into the parking lot and run it.
You could, most sewers run in right of ways. And that's, you don't have public sewers running around middle of private lots.
I don't know, except in St. Helens.
So it is an option.
They go right down the back of the yards or something. Yeah, right down the backyards. It's actually kind of smart.
This site is, the parking on it, is that more than enough? Is there, I mean, or is that? The required amount of space for parking? I don't know, I mean, if.
We're about,
I think this is matching what we have.
I think it's about what we were able to show on the Castor site, so I think we were showing that you're not losing a lot of parking if you use this site.
117th is so wide, there's a lot of parking.
And there's, I don't even think we were I mean, at this very high level, look at these 4 sites, I don't think we've factored in the street parking as something that counts towards the public parking.
But in this zoning district, we can count the adjacent on-street parking, at which there's a ton of. And so conceivably, you wouldn't have to provide public parking because it's already provided in this case.
But we could provide a fully secure police parking lot.
So we could reduce the parking that's there, in other words.
Potentially, yeah, it appears. We also would need.
I'm just looking at maybe in future, if they do expand on it.
Right, and we would need to look at, and we haven't, but we would need to look at whether or not there's any landscape open space requirements for this.
Yeah, those are,
We're probably not really factoring that into this trace over the site with
the fact that the parking, because we concluded for the current one, it was challenged, that the secure parking wouldn't trigger some of the normal parking landscaping requirements. For example, more than 20 spaces, you're supposed to have rows not exceeding 7 with landscape islands and trees.
Right.
In this case, because the public parking is accommodated on the street and everything within the site is secure parking, there's a lot of those green space requirements simply wouldn't be triggered.
If we did need more parking, the right of ways on Cowlitz and North 17th could be reconfigured to perhaps have parallel parking. Or you can just, you know, you get a 10 or 15 feet out of it too.
Yeah, if the belt is feeling tight, there's the potential to vacate some right of way and loosen it a little bit.
keep me honest, but it sounds like 2 of the sites are potentially enough to say more viable than the other 2, and that would be this site and the sheriff's office sites.
would it be safe to assume that the other two don't require further investigation?
Don't know if we can make that determination in this meeting. But I don't think, can we make
This is a
decisions?
direction, you're just asking for direction.
I mean,
Furthering
We're
information,
not working on.
furthering information.
a heck no poll, you know, there's nothing that says you can't do that. It's general guidance, not official, not state decision making.
And is there another site that we haven't talked about that should be considered? Is there a site that you would like to have?
There's only one other one I can think of. That'd be the corner of, Pittsburgh and Highway 30. Pittsburgh Road and Highway 30. I know the sewer line is difficult because it stops at the end of where the Dairy Queen will be, past the Jiffy Lube. And it's very difficult. There's no water or sewer on the other side of Pittsburgh Road. But that,
Way out at the end of town.
that's on the corner of Pittsburgh and Highway 30. Pittsburgh Road, where the boatyard was, got cleaned up.
I think on the off street on that, that's where they come in with this facility on that.
I don't think they have anything out.
I don't, yeah, but that's what if they had to go, come in.
It's hard to tell because where Burger King was, that was solid with salt, and
Yeah.
where Jiffy Lube is, that's all dirt.
But I know the
It
sewer line,
was that close.
the sewer line does end at where the Dairy Queen would be, it stops right there.
Yeah, because it was
And
extended.
then it goes into a private sewer line that comes through the old hospital complex, so like Rex Murray, Dentistry. There's a line that comes through there and goes and slices right through the whole hospital as a private line. Well, it's just one right there.
But they noted that the Dairy Queen lot is solid rock. Some of that subdivision, there was a wetland that was filled. And that's why there was some areas that aren't classic basalt, but they had to punch through a whole lot of basalt to put in that sewer line.
Yes, they did.
The original plat of the city. And it encompasses a portion of the site.
It actually does, yeah. You remember.
So there is an option to go right through the Dairy Queen though, in front of that first building right here, Jenny, if you go up, yep, right there. That building right there is the Oregon State Extension Office, which is managed by the county. Their parking lot would actually go right through there from the dairy. You could straddle a line. The sewer line probably is sufficient enough for a big space, so.
Yeah.
It's a big commercial space. Is it the best use? I don't know. It's about 5 acres of commercial industrial property for a city. Total, because the city owns two little parcels, we acquired those, and then there's this street right of way. The only one that would need to be purchased is where the house is, it's a little over an acre.
And they're asking $2 million or something for them.
Was it? I don't know.
That's the number I heard.
Oh,
I'd like to see it more centrally located.
Actually, it was
Yeah, that's why I still like that one that y'all said was number one last time.
the original number one.
Yeah.
And we had looked at the corner of Deer Island Road and there where Hin's building is. Possible location. City shops are there on the north side.
So that one right there, that whole little square up to the storage units.
Big billboard there, which is about
I remember the police coming in and doing testimony and concerned with they had showed us a map of their call volume. And that was what drove the site to Castle Road, was where most of their calls are.
And the ability to circumvent
Right.
train and other
Predominant-
issues.
predominant Where they go
access, yeah.
versus how far they have to drop.
So there's Sandeena, spent a good amount of time with the team trying to get outside.
And so would have,
Just with the high density housing that's come to town, it seems like. that's
For the call volume.
Where the most people are.
So then the sheriff's office would be comparable to that.
Right, so that's what drove it to that side away from some of those other sites.
Because in theory, if it's on Columbia Boulevard and the train stops, it can cover both Columbia and St. Helens Road.
Right.
He's stuck in there. And have to go around all the way to get to Eagle Road to get out.
Jenny, do you happen to remember where the majority of the calls were? I don't know if I've ever seen.
They, at the time, there was not broadleaf, they were talking about Walmart and all that, high density housing on the other side, but it was Walmart and like where all that side.
Still that neighborhood.
Yeah,
Could,
you know, like, Woodland, what's it called, Forest Park?
okay, okay.
Yeah, it's just where the high density is focused,
So,
and Walmart, and kind of that Safeway corner.
So I think broadleaf into the mix is the same.
Right, right, and now you have, at the time that this was, there wasn't St. Helens apartment, there wasn't the Violet's Villa, that wasn't there. Neither was Broadleaf, and so now it's even more units that are in that same area that has already been.
That makes sense, yeah.
You're working under the theory that when the police get a call, they're coming from the police station, that they're never out and around in the patrols. They're always out.
90% of the time is what.
I-
This is not a-
I'm not making the opinion, this was.
No, but that's what I'm saying is that theory is like, well, it's from the station. Well, they're not there at the station. Shouldn't
Well,
be.
I mean, this was their report.
Yeah.
It's not my report, I don't write the crop for any more than you know.
you just,
How often is that?
Here.
you just zoom into the.
Backseats are hell to get out of.
Can you tell us about those times you have to?
I try to stay out of crop parks.
I just want to remind everybody that the original site, you know, I mean, we were actually set to go, construction of spring of last year.
Right.
But nothing got streamlined on it. It's been difficult. You can see the dirt there. That's not actually the dirty dirt deal. That's the free dirt from a different deal.
We know that.
So.
We know that.
Worked on that site, that was in 2020,
Yes,
because there
yeah.
could be anything I talked about, that was in
Yeah.
2020.
Just to ask the obvious, that could not be parted out to where everything beyond the 100-foot floodplain that would be all.
That was redesigned actually to miss that by 3 feet and because of the
I'm
shrinking.
just talking about the parcel itself, you know, that, I think that's the issue, you know, what it is, it's just basically landscaping. You just wall it off all along that curve, if you can, and,
Oh, there's all, yeah, the FEMA flood maps are really hard to look at because they look at bridges and they, you know, I mean, you can probably direct and do culvert ditches over here and say, well, this is gonna alleviate the FEMA because of the bridge, back up the bridge.
yeah, well, if you're widening out the bridge at Milton Creek, that's a plan.
You know, like I said,
Help mitigate it a little bit.
yeah, I stated in my council meeting, I've talked to a couple different people who are 80, and one guy made a funny comment. He goes, well, it's never flooded in my lifetime, but I'm only the 80-year flood plan. So.
You know, I'm just wondering if that could be done, you know, everything with the 100-year floodplain. Could be a parcel in itself, and then just call the other part.
I just wanted to make a recap of that though, because I mean, this has not been for a lack of effort of trying to.
Well, it's an outlet.
We all know there's a need for a police station, right? I mean, I just want to state that. But I wrote the first site, if it was, you know, what we talked about in our council meeting, when you were counselor at the time, and the reason we didn't go with that was the sewer line and the cost of tearing down the building. This was our property. Seemed easier. And they actually, the officers themselves picked that site. Just so you know, it was narrowed down to 4. And then it got narrowed down to 2, they picked that site.
The Columbia Boulevard site?
So, Castor Road. Yeah.
So what was their opinion or their take on the Columbia Boulevard side?
I don't think there was I just think they liked this.
Like the idea of being open.
Yeah, and I think they just knew that this had room to grow too, because it's a bigger parcel and it does have, you know, I mean, we're not gonna be always a city of, we've doubled in size, right? And that's what we were trying to look 50 years in the future.
Sure.
That 18th Street may be undersized in 50 years.
Yeah.
And maybe they look at the same problem. We'll all be gone. I know I will. I'm not gonna live to be 100 and something.
When you build a police annex.
Or
Yeah, precinct, yes.
Another precinct.
Yes, yeah, but that, you know, I was just kind of the theory and look at that. I'm just trying to tell you what I was thinking and what I thought I heard being discussed was room to grow. Yep.
It was a lot bigger building. It had all the civic functions and the courtroom and
Which I was against in the first place. Taj Mahal, we don't need it.
I think doesn't it all still come down on the criticism of it all is the cost of it, and it seems like. Whatever reason. They face an appeal on. The real issue is the cost of the building. The cost was less than the appeal might not have happened, or,
Well, I think,
I mean-
I don't know, I just think there's a lot of politics involved in a lot of decisions, and you know, I don't sit up here and try to get into the weeds too much, I just try to make common sense of what's in front of me, I don't know.
Well, I thought the risks for the 100-year floodplain were well mitigated in that site. I thought it was well presented. I was comfortable with it. I don't know if that's off the table or.
I mean, again, like I said, I try not to get political, but all I know is that the one person who really challenged this and another person that challenged anything with police, both are running for mayor, so I try to say as minimal as I can on this.
The one thing that was brought up last night, and I know that. The consultants had a hard finish time, is it was. Testimony was brought up that they are short of storage. So they thought, why aren't we looking at redesigning the building that we have and adding storage instead of building a whole new building? And I'm just bringing that because that was part of public testimony last night, I think.
I've not heard that from the police though.
No, but it was community member to the planning commission, so I mean, if we're gonna talk about everything. You know, make the best decision for everything.
I don't think that's, I realize that was testimony, but I don't think that's. For me, the bigger issue though is, as I toured the police station too, when I was on that committee, is there's a potential that a victim could be sitting at one cubicle. And the accused
Absolutely.
is right in the next cubicle, traumatizing the victim all over again by just that action.
It is
That
very
big,
small.
huge
Not much
thing.
room.
Yeah.
Changing in the parking lot to put uniform on.
Yeah,
In the last 2 or 3 years since that kind of discussion started about that building hasn't improved any, and it's got a whole list of issues.
the old one, yes, yeah. Well, there's no doubt, 2,200 square feet is very small. It's a brick and mortar, I don't know how you would people are like, remodel it.
To me, that's a tear down and rebuild.
So, I mean, I think that you couldn't even keep prisoners in there, it'd be against the law. That's how I think the building is, the state of its condition.
Yeah, I don't think they've ever.
Yeah, but you couldn't, and we're keeping the police in there, so, I mean, they're not even giving them the, treating them as well as what people are keeping in jail.
Well, I think there's also. For retention and recruiting, people want to work in a great place, and then like it seems to be frivolous that you would ask for it, but it really is big, it's a big
That
deal.
was one of the main reasons we wanted to help assist, you know, we've increased from 3.2 million in 7 years, and we thought this building would be the vital tool to retaining officers. Yeah, that's.
one of the positive things about having a jail in town is that we don't need to build a facility that has holding cells. There's a lot of requirements go around that as far as staffing and security and just the design and footprint. Basically.
I'm just using that to illustrate the condition of the building.
So I know for what I hear people saying, if money wasn't the issue, 18th Street, that's what I hear. I mean, I think that's what we heard the first go around, it was number one. It was also talked about at our council meeting, why that was economically not feasible. But it's. So if money is not the issue, which it always is. But if it wasn't, where would the site be? Where would the police station be? 18th Street.
Columbia.
Yeah, yeah. Money wasn't an issue. Just throwing that out there, be the devil's advocate.
What is the timeline? How far are we into the timeline for the anticipated appeal process for Lula? We are at the end of the notice withdrawal period. There's a 90-day period where basically things are on pause. So that the last day is March 27th. Then after that, there's the preparation of the record. And that's what could be tug of war, and LUBA does not have any time limit on the record. So the record is submitted, they challenge it, and that could last several months. Right now, once the record is established, then I believe Bill Monahan at the last council meeting said there's 21 days, two 21-day periods for the attorneys to do their thing.
And that's why I spoke loudly. I'll be honest with all y'all. I spoke loudly. I think that it's a mistake not to go, because of the feasibility and the room to grow that Castor Road. Was the right site. That's if I'm one vote.
I agree with you, Mayor, but I just, if it goes south or back and
Oh,
forth.
I know that.
You know, that's my concern.
And when
But
you got
like I
money,
said, I
you
think
can- I'm not an attorney, and when you got money, you can fight just because you wanna be ornery, you can do that.
What's the additional cost of bringing that up above the floodplain? Yeah.
Which floodplain?
I don't know that off the top of my head, but I think that
It's about like 1.5 million, like I remember hard site cost is 1.5 to
I mean,
2.
it's involved with footings and all that, so. I mean,
it's just mostly site work. It's just building up the site. But there was a need to build up the site to a degree anyway, so if we didn't have to do that to bring up the elevation, there would still be site work investment on the site anyway, so the actual delta between not elevating it and elevating, I don't know. If we don't know that off the top of our head, but we could try to determine that.
Well, I'm just saying, you're saying that there's issues here on the Boulevard side. But there's a big issue just to stay down there.
Well, it's 2 feet above the 500-year floodplain is what I understood. Is that correct?
Three.
3 feet above the 500-year floodplain. So yeah, that's a lot of fill.
We're above the 100-year by a healthy amount, and then we are, I can't remember, I don't know if we're 3 feet above the 500.
Sorry, it's 2 to 3.
I think we're somewhere between 2 and 3 feet above the 100-year, but it's still above the 500-year, so the elevation is above. And the way the water would flow across the site based on what we looked at is that it's just how much of the site the water will work its way up to, like a wave on the beach, like it gets to a point and then it just keeps going, and so that's kind of how it would go. And we've elevated it so that the water's not gonna be a tidal wave cresting the side of the building, it's just gonna be the extent of how that water flows over the
It's
site.
actually the opposite, because when I was asking Jacob for an explanation of the FEMA maps, he said it was the pinch points of the bridges that they look at, with mushrooms them out and then backs them up
Yeah,
and out.
yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, if you had a bigger bridge, bigger opening, it would change the flow of that. If you put a culvert ditch halfway up between the stoplight and the rec center where traditionally it goes, when we do actually have a 100-year flood.
Right.
And only 2 there, and you put a culvert ditch, feeding, and it ran back towards the creek naturally, you just put a culvert ditch there, there's some type of alleviation of remedy for that 100-year, 500-year floodplain.
The
Flow.
damn carry.
I had.
I wish he was here.
Yeah. Stop that right away.
I just have a hard time. I think it was like 5 feet of water that was gonna be cresting over that
No,
road. Wasn't that what was reported?
That's what apparently the topos show. That's why I'm 6 feet, and it was 6 feet of water in a 100-year
I find it
flood.
hard.
On a 100-year flood, 5 to 6 foot wall of water on Old Portland Road. Now, that bill's been down there for over 100 years. And I've never heard of any reports of nobody being able to get in and out of the mill the entire time I've lived here. Not even an old story from the old timers, when I was 7 years old, that I heard. Yeah, so that's why I thought, again, one of my things was, I came in and questioned that right after and I'm just being honest, after the denial of you guys, I came in and questioned Jacob, how many people ask questions about your report? Because I have some questions. 5 to 6 foot wall water, where did you get this from, Jacob? Didn't I? I mean, I'm just being honest. That's who I am.
And it's simply the FEMA data versus actual elevation.
Yeah, and you said nobody came in to talk to you, and I was like, well,
Do we have any further questions for the consultants so they can keep their time schedule or?
Well, we're always available. I know that we need to be here in this forum, but if there are any questions, John, you could reach out to us and we could try to be as helpful as possible. To get to your point, I think the delta would be just the Castor site versus the 18th site would be, what would be the cost for moving the sewer line? And how much would it cost to acquire the property? And that's assuming Castor is a viable site and the appeal process comes back with, yeah,
The cost of the appeal and the,
right.
raising the site.
So, I mean, there's data for each site that you would need to be able to assess, not even thinking about the variable of whether or not the appeal or the approval is honored or if it's dismissed as kind of a frivolous appeal. So.
yeah,
But the cost estimate for the Castor Road did include the site work and fill to be at that 2 feet above the 500.
It did, and we could look back at that. You have that, but we can look back at that and break out that information to be helpful to the consideration. But there's things that we don't know. We don't know how much the sale price, purchase price would be for that property. As well as I don't know if we have an understanding of costs of relocating the sewer line. And to your point, do we want the sewer line to be adjusted on the site or would it be relocated to the right of way would be preferable if you were expanding your infrastructure in the city of St. Helens, that it would be in the right of way instead of bisecting the property. So those are all considerations that yeah, so
I think our engineering team can, I've already asked the question, just haven't got to it yet, is whether you put it in the street right away or whether some of the parking aisles on site, there'd be conceivably less work to do without having to build to a public standard just in the parking lot. And we can get a dollar value on that estimate.
As far as the architecture goes, how much can you manipulate your existing structure? Narrow it up, is that
I mean, there's always probably an opportunity to change the footprint of the building. I think the way that it is now is it's fairly square and it's meant to be as efficient as possible with the structural grid and the adjacencies of the program that need to be accommodated for police. And I think there could be an opportunity to change that, to have it fit on the site better without approaching on that easement for the sewer line, without looking at the plan and looking at that dimensional impact. I'm not sure what that change would look like, but that's something that we would want to work with Chief on to see how that flow for the agency would change as an idealized.
Yeah.
Because right now the current design is significantly smaller than the original design. I believe it does have a small margin of growth factored into it, but not as ideal as what was previously sought after for the growth of the police department. So we just have to look at that.
Yep.
But it's conceivable.
how much time will be required on that process? 'Cause I stepped in on a few of your meetings, with Chief, John and, David. And, just, I mean, talking about even taking out a couple layers of brick and the cost savings of that on the height of the roof and stuff like that, and everything was discussed to very detailed.
Yeah, we look at
mean,
ways to bring the cost down. I think that the thing that we have the benefit of now is we have obviously a relationship working with the police department, so we understand what the needs are. We went through the needs, the programming. We know what the program is. I think it's You know, we've got the tile puzzle and we made the tiger and maybe we change it into a gazelle instead, but we can move the pieces of the program around, trying to preserve as much of the adjacencies that need to be critically maintained as possible. But that effort will take a little bit of time. I think we could probably do something like that. I don't know, somewhere in the 1 to 2 month range, maybe less. I think what we would need to do is meet with police and understand if we had to change this, how would you like to see that happen? And without getting into that conversation, I think it could be a really easy exercise or it could be challenging. But we would want to make sure we are prioritizing what police wants to prioritize before we look at that change.
So, but and I just wanna, just cause we're talking about it, but if the appeal were dropped tomorrow, we could actually build that police station with 12.6 million, that real close to that budget. As identified. Starting at weather depending.
Yeah.
Well, and the other.
Just wanna throw that out
The
there,
other
there is
thing
always
is
that.
Every time we send it back to them, that sends the cash register going.
Well, I don't think we should send it back to them until we take care of the sewer and ownership. That's it. You don't have anything if you don't have ownership.
So, cause I just see a
Those two
political,
things are the ones that are in question.
I just see a political firestorm coming that if we go to the county, it's gonna be that there's. Somebody trying to overtake an agency, and then, if we go to 18th, it's gonna be, this is a huge cost. I just see two big, different realms. And, correct me if I'm wrong, you live in the same community I do.
How long?
And that's where we're zeroed it down to.
Put us together, a decision. Yeah. And the sewer thing,
I just wonder if there's any other encumbrances, whatever would affect.
I think we just make it zoning, was that clean? Would that be clear to put a police station there, Columbia Boulevard?
There's one portion of the site that would need to be rezoned. Yeah, so it's a square, right? You have 8 lots. What happened is when we rezoned the whole area to Holton Business District, at the time, it prohibited residential on the ground floor. And Wayne, the owner, he had some fantasies of building housing there, and so he convinced the council to maintain the Holton Business District along Columbia Boulevard, but for the other 6 lots, keep it as general commercial. So the original proposal was for that whole thing to be Holton Business District. That's the story, and that's why I think it would be an easy and non-controversial change, because that was the idea anyways. And then obviously Wayne hasn't pursued residential.
We know people.
So that I don't see that as being a problematic zone change.
But I wouldn't tell them to get to work on anything, tell them know exactly where we're going.
Yeah, I don't think that's what we're looking for entirely, is we're looking at, well, what we're not pursuing, right? So.
Unless there's any more questions, I do need to leave. I apologize for leaving, but I do need to go.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
We're here, you know how to get a hold of us. We're here for you to help.
Yes. Be much.
Thank you all.
Bathroom break.
Yeah, any other discussion? Anybody have any points they want to bring up? Okay, let's take a bathroom break and then we'll get through these last little code amendments and probably call it adjourned, huh? We have everybody back here. Russell's kind of brought up the question and kind of, so the censuses that we're looking at the, 18th Street and the, sheriff's station. The census of kind of directing,
I didn't mean to do that.
um,
Politically, one might be messy.
they both. they both could be-
You can warn it, you've
Uh,
got that duck suit.
So now we're gonna go on to code amendments and then after that, we'll come back and we'll talk about architectural standards and vacant storefronts, just to kind of see where we want to go from here, because I know everybody wants to get going. Jacob?
Okay, yeah, thank you. So this is a quick overview, and it's for the purpose of the council. I will be before you in 2-3 months asking for the blessing to proceed with legislative amendments. So this is just plant some of those seeds, so when I come before you, then you're like, oh yeah, I remember talking about some of this. Before that, the planning commission will dive into the text. So the intent is to start diving into the text. And this way, for the planning commissioners, when you're reading that, you've been introduced to some of it, so you have some context of what the heck you are reading. So this batch of amendments covers several things, and some going back 5 years. First, our housing needs analysis from 2009. I'm calling that residential code amendments part 2. If some of you recall, a few years back, we eliminated single-family zoning in St. Helens. So anywhere where a single-family zoning was allowed before, we have to allow duplex, and we went further and said it could be a duplex or 2 detached homes. Our housing needs analysis from 2019 included us looking at having our code allowing cottage clusters. And that's basically more than 2 detached houses on a property. And we're getting into this attached detached thing as far as modernizing our code. So it's really the next step beyond those duplex amendments. Back then, I contemplated whether or not to include it, but the duplex and the other stuff that we included, it was a pretty steep mountain to climb, and it would have been too much to add it. So that's that, and I'm going to talk about that part a little bit more in detail. Some of the other ones is just the overview here. Measure 109, 2020, that's those are the psilocybin rules. That is something that we've discussed with both groups. And everybody seemed in favor of establishing some local rules, because we wasn't sure how those are going to play out. As a reminder, Oregon passed a law that allows psilocybin for medical purposes per se, although you don't need to be a doctor to divvy out the stuff. Basically, we're going to allow that as a conditional use permit in certain zones. House Bill 4064 from 2022, that pertains to manufactured structures and prefabricated structures. Now, we've had manufactured home law in our code for a long time. Prefabricated structures is a new one. Basically, what that pertains to is us having to allow manufactured homes and prefabricated structures outside manufactured home parks. One of the changes from several years ago that we have to honor now was for a long time, we had to, we could prohibit single wides, but we could allow manufactured homes if they were multi-sectional. We have to allow single wides now, and then prefabricated structures we have to allow. We also re-looked at the rules about allowance within manufactured home parks. We only have one of those, Crestwood, and so we'll be talking about that too. We're getting a little bit into architectural standards, and when I mean that, just the city's ability to control appearance. The code does allow us to prohibit manufactured homes and prefabricated structures within historic districts and adjacent to historic landmarks. And so that is proposed in the code.
So the next one, childcare facilities, House Bill 3109 from 2021. So for years and years, well, first of all, there's two types of childcare facilities. There's the ones in residential homes, and then there's ones that are larger commercial scale. For, I think as long as I've been a planner, way back in 2001 when I started, we've had to be nice to childcare in dwellings, and that persists. But this bill took that a step further as far as us having to be nice for the commercial ones. So we can't require a conditional use permit and put them before the big bad planning commission. And basically, we just need to adjust the uses. For the most part, these amendments only address our residential and commercial properties. Interestingly, the childcare one, we delve into the light industrial a little bit, because we're supposed to allow them there. So that one shouldn't be controversial, but it's actually, fair amount of work. Single room occupancies, what the heck is that? Well, it's actually a question that I've had for a long time. What the heck do I do with these? And state law finally gives us an opportunity to answer that question. So usually when we're talking about a dwelling unit, we're talking about an area that has complete independent living, sanitation, cooking, the whole, everything that you would normally have in a home.
Yeah.
The single room occupancy is kind of like a dormitory setting where you have a living unit, but you have shared lavatories and or kitchens.
Going for full circle back to boarding houses.
Yeah, in a sense. And so we are supposed to allow those now. And we don't have to amend our code to allow them. But it's a good idea if home rule authority matters to us and we want some local control. The planning commission seemed to want to go with that. And so we're gonna include our single room occupancy rules in the code. Validity period, basically that's how long is a land use permit valid before it is used. Jenny and I attended the annual legal workshops, legal issues for planners workshop in December in Portland. And there was some discussion about those, and we're like, well, we should relook at these. And Jenny put some time into that, and we saw that they were kind of all over the place. And so we kind of cleaned those up. We worked with the planning commission on that. And then just some general housekeeping, which we usually have for code amendments. One example, one distinction in our general versus highway commercial zoning is we have a category that talks about catering to motorists. And in the whole time I've been here, I've been trying to figure out what the hell that means. And Jenny's been trying to figure it out, and we're like, we don't know what it means. Let's just get rid of it. So that's an overview. I'm going to talk about the housing part just a little bit, because that's the most significant catalyst to this batch of code amendments. So a little bit of a history lesson. And first of all, we're going to talk about attached housing. St. Helens, I believe, was the first community in Columbia County to have zoning. We had zoning as early as 1953. And attached housing just means units attached. And you have two examples of duplexes there. It could be a duplex, which means 2 units, or multifamily, 3 or more. That's allowed from 1953 and still allowed today. Between 1999 and 2018, you could have an attached auxiliary dwelling unit, a secondary unit attached to a home with a conditional use permit. We had very few, if any, applications for those.
Which was surprising. Really, when you think about it.
Yeah.
The conditions were difficult.
And then state law said you can't do that anymore. So there was a brief period where we allowed them with the site development review. But as I kind of mentioned at the beginning of this little presentation, when we were required to eliminate single family zoning, we said, well, let's allow duplexes and also a second unit.
So now we don't really have this ADU permit, that second detached unit is outright permitted. So that's attached housing. Now detached, where we have the separate units, kind of a similar story. But only kind of. If we go back to 53 to 1999, just not allowed. It had to be a duplex with 2 units or a triplex or larger. You couldn't have that detachment. And then when we first had our auxiliary dwelling unit rules, that did allow a detached ADU, but there was restrictions about its size and things like that. And then also between 18 and 21, we had more friendly standards. And we actually had a handful of permits, I think maybe half dozen for those. But then today, yeah, you want a second house, outright permitted. We don't care if it's smaller or bigger. But that only applies to duplexes, not to multifamily for 3 or more. And so that is a large part of the drive. So if this is just a basic diagram of what's allowed now and what's not allowed, but would be if these code amendments are successful. So in the upper left-hand corner, you have a single building on a lot. It has 1 or 2 units. We don't care. We treat them the same. The next one over, 2 single family dwellings, detached single family dwellings on a lot. That's okay now too. Now, the remainder of the top row are separate single units on narrower lots. In fact, we talked about this quite a bit yesterday on a variance with the Planning Commission. And there's 2 examples there because you can have 2 and up to 5 attached, although people almost always do 2. So then looking at the bottom row, the multifamily, where you have 3 or more units on a lot. In the lower left-hand corner, you have basically 6 units, 2 triplexes. Yeah, that's fine as long as they're in groups of 3. But the one in the middle, a group of 3 and a group of 2, can't do it technically just because of the definition of multifamily. And then having 3 or more detached units is also and that's the cottage cluster, but we're looking at making that be okay. We had no negative testimony when we allowed the 2 detached homes. So I don't see this freaking people out. It's really modernizing our code as we drift from the old school. And some of those legacy rules from the 50s to where we are today.
Well, is this from this point forward?
It's from the point forward where we actually adopt the code.
Yeah. Right, but I mean, it's not like if I wanted to put a second building on my house or on my lot, could I do that?
It's an outright permitted use. You could do 2, but if you did 3, then I make that annoying buzzing noise that I won't do again.
No, I like the theatricals.
Yeah, I enjoy it.
It keeps you awake.
Yeah.
So I thought this was kind of interesting. This is text from the 50s zoning ordinance. And there's a couple of interesting things there. One, it has those classic definitions of, duplex or 2-family, 2 dwellings in 1 building, and then multifamily, 3 or more. But the other thing that I found was really interesting in going back to this original code is under single family, it talks about, in which there's not more than 4 borders. And the reason that stuck out to me was because of this single room occupancy thing. I thought it was interesting that state law says the single room occupancy applies when you have 4 or more of those sleeping units. So for example, let's say we have a single family dwelling and it has 3 or less sleeping units. That doesn't trigger that new category, but once you have 4 or more, then it does. And I just thought it was interesting that aligned with this 50s zoning ordinance in a sense. So, the geek in me thought that was worth sharing. This table is really complex, but it does show you all of the current residential uses possible in all of the zoning districts, which are color coded by the zone on the zoning map.
And then it also shows us what's proposed in the current draft. And the areas that we're tweaking are in between the horizontal broad lines. So we're talking about 3 or more units in a residential property, as we talked about. We're also getting into units above permitted uses, for example, here in the Riverfront District, Plaza Subdistrict. We don't allow residential on the first floor, but we do on the upper. And so there's a distinction whether or not there's up to 2 and then 3 or more upper level units. There's the single room occupancy, and we're also trying to make uniform the rules for having residential and non-residential on the same level. So we're cleaning that up across the code and saying where detached and attached units are allowed. It complicates it, but it will provide more options for folks. And this is something we'll get for the planning commission with, but I at least wanted to give you this heads up. The next slide is just the zoning map. I always like to have it there, just in case there's a discussion, you can see the colors versus the table. And then the last slide, special notice. When we play with our development code and we're creating new rules, and there's the potential for the new rules to be more restrictive, we are required to send a special notice out to all property owners that talks about the potential impact of value. We did that with the duplex rules. I can't remember how many notices we sent out because it's been a few years, but easily in the 4 digits.
So essentially, it's everybody. I mean, it looks like. You
Yeah,
got the
it's-
Marina District to the Plaza to
It's-
the whole River District.
Yeah, and it'll be another big notice. It's a good thing to know because we send the notice out. It says it may affect the value of your property, and then you as counselors may, hey, what the heck are you doing?
And this is about the single room dwelling.
Yeah, the single,
Clusters too.
the cottage cluster itself, because that's backing up,
Yeah.
that's making things easier. So I don't think that would alone trigger, but the single room occupancy for sure. And redefining where you can have attached and detached. It's one of those things where if in doubt, send it out just to cover yourself legally. And so that's what we're doing here. Now, highway commercial, that's an interesting one, because right now in highway commercial, it's the least friendly to residential because the only residential possible are units above non-residential uses, but there's no density calculation. Technically, it could be infinite, barring parking. So, well, I want to put 1,000 units on here. There's nothing that says there's no density cap. Because highway commercial is our more commercial centric, that's one where we're saying no more than 2 units above. So that's why that's under the special notice as well. The one zoning district where we don't have to do that for sure is light industrial, because it's only for childcare and it's being less restricted. That's it.
I'm a little confused on the single room occupancy thing. Can you explain that a little? Maybe I missed something.
Oh, yeah, sure.
Yeah, it has been, that's exactly what I was gonna say.
It kind of,
But,
yeah.
I mean, what are the guidelines around it? I mean, like if I have a 4-bedroom house, can I rent out 3 bedrooms?
Yep. Single occupancy.
Okay.
Yeah.
The whole region, I think, is for it, is so you can do that. Just
So-
free up housing.
And if it's only 3, then it's not triggered. Once you do 4 or more, then it can
That's
be.
where I was confused.
Now, when
Okay.
Jenny and I were talking, we're like, this really sucks, because how are you gonna, in all practicality, it's gonna be the new ones that come in, that should be obvious. Enforcement will be an issue.
Mhm.
Yeah.
You have 10 cars on your street, neighbors.
You can literally build you can literally build a house with eight rooms in it. Put one big bathroom, man, female. And one kitchen and have 8 rentals.
Yeah, exactly.
So
You have to build one kitchen and one bathroom.
If they do it legally, we will
Bathrooms and
require,
kitchens are expensive.
we will require parking for it.
How many per single room?
Exactly, so
One.
so
One
they
per
would have
room?
to have 8 parking spaces on site if they did it legally.
Yeah, now
There are
that's
rules.
what we discussed with the planning commission. One is the same requirement for a studio apartment. Now it's possible through, this process, you'll be like, well, you know what, it should be a half space per sleeping unit. And that's, something to discussion, but we're starting with one per.
So to use my example, if I wanted to rent out 3 rooms, I'd have to have 3 spaces.
No, because the definition is 4 or more. So in your example, if it's only 3, you still fall under the definition of a single family dwelling. And let's say I'm like, you know what, this Mark Gunderson guy, I'm gonna throw the book at him. I can't. And now it's not the way I work, but just for the sake of it, entertainment slightly an explanation. Because it's 3, you are still a single family dwelling, but once you add that 4th one, now you're into this different residential use category.
That triggers the parking regulations.
And wherever a single family dwelling is allowed, we have to allow them up to 6. Treated comparably
It
as a
sounds
single
so
family.
confusing and hard to please. So I have a 4-bedroom house and I'm only gonna rent 2 rooms. Am I technically?
See,
Still?
this is why it's a nightmare. It's gonna be a nightmare.
And if 2 people sleep in my garage.
Yeah, is that really?
Homeowners.
That's half price.
I just borrowed one room.
Homeowners association, the city does not dictate what a homeowners association does generally. So if we allowed it, that owner dealing with their HOA would be a separate matter.
Because just because the city allows it doesn't mean the HOA allows it. Is that what you're thinking?
Exactly, yeah.
The HOA can have more restrictive rules than the city, but it's up to them to enforce those rules, not the city.
And I'm not aware of a lot of functional HOAs in town. There's HOAs, but
So if we have the single room occupancy, this is something to consider, and I'm being serious about this. On the cottage clusters, if I were to build. Let's say do a U shape, and I wanted 6 in this U shape. Different cottage clusters, and in the center, I wanna have a bathroom, kitchen slash. Little building, yes, hub for that. That's something to consider and think about, cause it's kind of a single room occupancy.
They're doing that in Portland.
Kinda is a little bit.
They're doing it in Portland with old.
It's something to think about.
based on the definition, those units are in one building. Now, if we wanted to expand that to allow the detached circumstance, we could. But as written now, it's all in one building.
I mean, cause I know sometimes you'll say, well, you can't have your garage detached, so what do you put, one board to the bathroom from each unit, so it's not detached? You know, I mean, that.
Yeah, there's always loopholes.
Yeah, so, something to think about though, because it's no different than. I find cottage clusters very fascinating, they really do, if done right, they can be really neat. Yeah.
Lot of potential.
Okay, so I know, we wanna be sensitive of everybody's time and, also wanna be sensitive of staff's time. Thank you guys. And I don't know what it looks like in the future, but I don't think we wanna wait 3 months I know we had a lot of, just scratch the surface of vacant storefronts and architectural standards. So I don't know how your availability is sooner than 3 months. And what would be a good time for you? We want to be sensitive to you. You have to record this, you have to do this, and pretty much just those couple items. You know, if we could talk about it for an hour.
So you're talking about having a joint meeting sooner than the normally quarterly.
Yeah, because we just barely scratched the surface on those two subjects.
They have to be full council and full planning commission to talk about vacant storefronts.
I mean, if we'd invite them all, yes. Yes.
I think now that we have a full planning commission, filled all our vacancies, we can establish our subcommittee on the vacant storefronts, although I'd like everybody, I love the idea you're proposing, that everybody is invited, but to avoid quorums and
Yeah.
those issues. We
And
do
would
subcommittee.
be invited to that as well.
Well, I think, so, and just, yeah, I just want to make sure that we, could have some direction that we are going in. We barely even scratched the surface before we took off on this. You know, I think that's clearly what happened with House Bill 3115 is we just barely scratched the surface and then it was put to a subcommittee and, there was a huge divide. As long as that doesn't happen, I'm okay with whatever. I just don't want, I think communication was key that was lost before, yes.
It's a different group.
I love all the extra input because the amount of hours that the subcommittee put in on HB 3115 currently was a lot.
It was.
We only have one retired person on the planning commission at this point. We all work a full-time job otherwise. So to have put in the hours that were put in on that subcommittee is not reasonable for me personally.
Sure.
So to have that extra help, and maybe we lay the groundwork and then go to the subcommittees, I'm not sure, but.
What does everybody think? Everybody thinking, feeling? I don't know. I'm just trying to,
Yeah.
feel it out.
Maybe we could set up another meeting to talk about what we want to do going forward,
Just
whether it's
that, I
all
like it.
working together, some
We
subcommittee.
could do it via Zoom. We don't have to meet. We can always Zoom in. Would that be easier for you guys?
Well, so there was a discussion about a task force. And I think this was a good kind of introductory thing. If there was a task force with, you know, a little bit of Main Street, a little bit of planning commission, with a little bit of council, but not enough council and planning commission that it's a, you know, official body. And that task force can, you know, put their brains together and then come back to the normally scheduled meeting with a body of work and recommendations. That might be an efficient way to go.
That's actually a great idea. Getting that involvement in that three and everything.
Well, and the counselors can report back to the council during their reporting, you know, what's going on so that no one's in the dark. And same with the
Great idea.
same with the
And
planning
whoever-
commission.
You know, I could volunteer, but whoever wants to jump in there from the council standpoint, do.
Jessica's available.
Just nominate her. She's gone.
But like this is, this is the full platoon. And if you have your, you know, your elite special forces
You
people.
wouldn't have to have the, yes, you could actually have, you wouldn't have to go and do a public.
But to your point, keeping them in the loop as things progress so that you don't go down a path that's not gonna be cool.
Yeah, yeah, that's all I'm trying to avoid. Nobody like that.
Understood.
Well, I think it needs to be as transparent as possible, much community involvement as possible through the course of it, because it is gonna be really controversial. I mean, I'd love to see that we could do this all through incentive instead of having penalties, but I think that's gonna come into play, that we're gonna have to do something. Both ways,
Yeah.
and people aren't gonna like it,
As
so.
I've stated in our planning commission meetings, I think it's gonna be you gotta have both. You gotta have both incentives, but you also have to have that stick ready to on some parts of it.
Well, I like the idea that Main Street brought up about approaching those property owners and kind of being the go-between. That's what that's what I kind of got from that. I don't know.
Increases the wheel.
Yeah, so it's not so harsh.
So 3 planning commissioners avoids a quorum and 2 counselors, right? Do I have that right?
They always add other
Rotate.
specialists or people.
I'd like that you're already on the planning commission to be one of the counselors. And I don't.
Jessica, so we're done.
And I don't know if any other one.
I'm fine with that.
Anybody else does, you know, I don't wanna. For perception purposes, I've already been thrown under the bus about Main Street and being under, just attending their meetings. I'm not affiliated with them financially in any way, shape or form. I just attend their meetings as a liaison, kind of, so to speak.
Just supporting
But,
them.
but, I don't wanna feel like that person influencing. Because, I don't wanna be sitting on that because I will be perceived as I am the one directing all this.
Yeah, no insight.
And that's already been that way publicly. And, it is just political. I'm okay with it. I can handle it and I will. And I will. If nobody else wants to, but, Mark, would you be willing to? be-
Yeah, I'm fine with that, yeah, absolutely.
Talking to Russ and I'm talking to Brandon, then. And I will. I mean, I have no problem.
On Main Street, and we
I-
have grants, so that.
I agree.
If Brandon would be available because his historic knowledge of the community is unmatched, so.
If you have time to do
You
that.
would have time. for it.
Yeah, and if you needed somebody to fill in, I would, whatever. I would fill in, okay, as a backup, if something happened, okay? All right. Then you guys pick three maybe now, or no?
Two planning commissioners absent, just want to
Dan,
be mindful of that, and David Rosengard, so just keep that in mind.
I think I'd like to make a few phone calls and figure out
Okay,
with the missing people.
all right, I know you all get together, let you guys facilitate that, sounds good.
What are we talking about then? Do we have a
It's up to that group.
ballpark? No idea right now.
they gotta find the other three.
Okay, I do have obligations on Tuesdays and Wednesdays, normally, so. And Thursdays and Fridays should be fine.
Don't call yourself the vacancy task force, maybe something more positive.
Okay. I'll take that. Do you have any suggestions?
Not off the cuff.
There
There you go. There you go. Names are important.
Yeah, the other thing I just want to make clear that we're going all the way up to, it's not just a river district issue. It's
Yeah.
all the way up to
Yeah.
I just got back
Yeah,
from
18,
conference and they talked about it being, you think about it like one house or one business, but it really changes a whole neighborhood. So it really is community revitalization because it changes
Yeah.
everything around it.
what I
One
know,
question I didn't get to ask of them when they're about that Georgia study that they mentioned when they, threw out the number.
uh-huh,
I think the number probably, whatever the right word is, multiplies. Once you start getting more than one, storefront in there, it exponentially increases the
Yeah, I
amount.
mean, it's 2012 numbers and I don't know if anybody follows minimum wage. They don't pay a lot in Georgia. So, those numbers for our area might be completely different.
The reverse is true too. There's a negative feedback loop when you have 18 storefronts, then everybody who's open suffers. There's ramifications
That's what I meant. I guess that's what I'm meaning. It could be,
the other way
it
too.
could be the other way too, yeah. When you're talking about it, you're talking about that lost revenue. Not just you add each storefront, it becomes even more so because of that
So,
loss of
and
connection.
again, so I was speak when I was very young, and I remember the industry fed all these stores, and we did not want, you had Vinny's Variety, you had Heine's Cafe, which is where Domino's Pizza is. I mean, that whole Holton area was bustling in downtown, just because of the industry. I mean, that's the bottom line is we need an
I moved out here in
industry.
95 and
You're
it's
gonna-
right vastly
you're gonna
different.
hear
It's
me
that fast.
Preaching that a lot, industry, so.
It's not unique to the town, though. I mean, you know, mill towns.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
It takes a
Yeah.
long time to build.
To rebound, it does, yeah.
I'm gonna speak to one thing about architectural standards.
Yeah, absolutely.
So last night in a hearing, we, heard, we reviewed historical guidelines for the Samuel Miles House, which is the big yellow house next to the Ice and Beverage.
Okay.
Now, the only reason were able to do that was because it's a city landmark. 4 lots away, Pilgrim was able with no review on Honesty Hill to build with no architectural review at all. Shove those houses in there. So part of our architectural review standards, I hope, is going to include expanding what the city's overlay instead of just the plaza district, but to expand to the entire I mean, yeah, the entire historic district, which is all the way, much far reaching than this little center core. So,
Could you not just have a standard that it has to be in character with it, and the buses right around?
well, there's been,
No,
Don't have.
I mean,
no, because in today's Oregon situation, we have to be clear and objective with our standards for residential, otherwise we get spanked.
You get sued.
And that's way too subjective.
and isn't it a benefit though to expand the district because we have special not privileges, but there's benefits so that you can say not in the historic district on some of these new.
At least for manufactured homes.
Yeah.
Except for the waterfront wouldn't have a lot of those, right? I mean, they're gonna have architectural standards, but they're not gonna be like, there's gonna be some modern, you're not gonna try to get to an 1800 brand new, I'm guessing, commercial building down here to have an early 1900 feel.
Well, the waterfront's not in the historic district, is it? So that wouldn't be.
Well, it is. It's three sections, right?
Right?
Yeah, so the architectural standards that apply where we're sitting here also applies to the extension on the Vineyard property.
But then it changes right here and there, right? There's three sections?
Yeah, over there, past St. Helens Street. That's
Well,
where it doesn't apply over there. Like the
Yeah.
marinas and stuff.
Yeah, the Marina, Plaza and Mill, yeah.
Yes, the plaza and the mill where the architectural standards apply.
Which I think is really important standards there in the new waterfront district.
So would that have been a marina over there?
What,
Yeah, the marina's over there.
So is that up there on the hill, what you're talking about, is that considered marina?
No, that's apartment residential.
so what Jennifer's
Or what?
asking for,
Yeah.
so see this hatching? This is our historic district. Everything in color is our historic district.
Far reaching.
Okay, well,
The hatching is the riverfront district.
yeah,
What Jennifer's asking for is any sort of architectural standards within the historic district, because right now, the only standards apply to the ones with the black little homes. Those are the designated landmarks. Those are the only ones that have any standards applied.
So the big yellow one is where
Well, you can.
the two duplexes on Second Street.
The Miles house right here. This is nice and very good. This is not within the district, but then you get these little jog that is in the district and it's just, you could fully encompass the entire historic district.
The riverfront district standards were developed by PSU architectural students. And the focus was on mixed use commercial buildings. So that's sort of a disconnect, right? That the riverfront district standards don't really address single family development, which a majority of the historic district is.
I had no idea.
So it's not as simple as saying, well, let's just make the
Yeah.
riverfront district standards apply to the historic district. So there has to be thought around what do we do with the historic district if what we want to accomplish is what Jennifer's talking about.
So that, there is two different though, the historical versus the mill it's a standard, but it's different. This is historical. And I didn't realize this went back that far to
What's
Forest.
the color code exactly?
So that is referencing our 1984 downtown historic district classifications. And there's different thresholds for those classifications outlined in that nomination form.
Okay, I see.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Primary significant, the yellow is pre-1904. The primary and secondary isn't like what's most important, what's not important, it's just a time frame, really.
Yeah, and
Before
they saw
or
the
after
fire.
the-
Yeah, on the fire of 1904.
So we did through the fire and didn't.
I just think when we initially talked about architectural standards, it was a different commission sitting there, but they wanted to be very far reaching throughout the city. And I think this is a really good place to start on the.
It's not as broad reaching and easier. It's an incremental step in having architectural standards. And I think it would have a bigger impact in preserving our historic district. If there were architectural standards for them.
I have a hard time around all that, so good luck.
We like to keep things
Here's
simple.
what the pushback will be is people saying, you can't tell me what I can do with my house, or if it goes within the
I
district.
get that, yeah.
But
But I was gonna use Russ's project as an example. To me, that's, that, like, if that was to be put down here, then to me, that would fit.
me too.
Okay, so that's why I kind of wanted to get, some sort of a,
It's like you went to all the trouble to do this beautiful basalt that matches the basalt here and. It's just
yeah, no,
awful.
and I just wanted a point of reference. You know what I mean, for new
So
construction.
basically, that's what you're saying, as long as it references some of the historical traits, that it's probably gonna, more than likely, I mean, it's architectural design. That's where it gets gray, cause all of a sudden somebody says, I don't think this is, and then another guy says, I don't think this is. and then
It's as simple as this, if you go up onto Honesty Hill, you say, there's these 6 houses, which ones are like the others?
Tell, yes, you could definitely, tell, there's no doubt about
It
that.
affects a lot of things, affects property values.
If they're in an area which is designated a significant area architecturally, if the permit triggers that, come to the planning commission and the group, just talking to the builder sometimes can do a lot. I've been through it in the city of Portland and I knew what I wanted to design and they wanted to change my roof design. You know, you'll have to let it talk, but at least the city is expressing that they really care about design. I mean, that's, you know, they'll do what they wanna do, but as long as they don't realize they're not being looked at, they'll just put the stuff in there all day long.
Well, it doesn't mean everything has to look like a Victorian or something. There's significant, very significant mid-century houses here in St. Helens. The Midway building is a significant Art Deco style building, so it's not that you want everybody to look cookie cutter like the same, it's just.
Have you looked at other cities and towns that have done the same type of, they approached it? You did put in a historic different district that has the, standards, whatever the standards they have implemented and what they've gone.
We need to
through.
go there, yeah, we need to go there.
That originally, she had that as 4 residents facing Diane, where she passed away, and it had an elevator going up from the bottom of Second Street, coming up and serving basically 3 levels. Drawn
It
up.
was a very significant house that was taken out of
Yeah.
there, bulldozed.
Yes, it was. That was her, yeah, that was Sandy's brother. Yeah.
Yeah, I remember that demo and we had a local architect that wasn't very happy with it.
Yeah.
I remember that very well.
Well, the blue house on the end, the Ross House. Built in what was that, built 1885, 1889, something. Very significant to this town. Can be bulldozed and I'll be chained to the porch on the news. No, but,
Okay, any other? Anybody? Okay, then we can go ahead and do it now. Thank you.